So sometimes golf can feel very, very easy, and we see perfect shots like that, straight at the target and the perfect distance. But other times, golf can feel incredibly difficult, and I'm sure you'll agree, incredibly frustrating. And I think a lot of it comes down to getting that setup correct, where we get told about aiming the club, getting the feet parallel to where the club's aiming, getting the knees, the hips and the shoulders correct, holding the club correctly, and then getting the ball position correct. And I think ball position is something that we can make incredibly simple so that it helps us deliver the club how we want with every club in the bag, and yet you can do the same thing at setup every time, because we'd all love to be more consistent and hit more consistent golf shots, wouldn't we? So a lot of the time we'll get told that the way we work ball position out is, say, 7-iron down to our wedges. The ball should be very much in the middle of our feet. And as the clubs get longer, the ball position should gradually move further forward until drivers may be opposite that left heel, maybe even left big toe for some golfers. But it kind of insinuates that everybody moves correctly, and very often I see golfers moving the ball position around trying to get a good strike. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to use a little visual thing, an alignment stick that you can use when you go down to the practice ground or the driving range, and you're going to put the alignment stick, say, half a club head inside your lead heel, and you're going to get the ball opposite that. And what we're going to say is we're going to keep the ball position in our feet the same, but we're just going to change the width of our stance slightly depending on what club we use. So I'm going to start with 7-iron, and I'm going to use a fairly narrow stance, maybe shoulder width is the equivalent of the outside of my feet. So we can see, even though that's just inside my lead heel, currently it's just slightly forward of my sternum. And then all I'm going to try and do when I swing the golf club is, as I get to the top, I'm going to shift my weight towards the target. That's going to get my sternum actually slightly in front of the golf ball and help me hit ball and then ground. Get the club travelling down and get the low point ahead of the golf ball. So from that slightly narrower stance, I'm going to focus on a good movement. And even though that wasn't right out the middle of the golf club, we can see on TrackMan there, low point 1.5 inches ahead, clubs travelled down 2 degrees, and the carry was 152. And that just felt very easy. And again, once I set myself up there, I've got the width of stance correct, focus on making the swing, slightly better strike, just more out the middle of the club. But again, that low point 1.8 inches ahead, clubs travelled down 2.4 degrees, and the carry up there at 166. So, like I said, I tend to see golfers, and particularly golfers that catch behind the ball or top it and thin it, they kind of move the ball further and further back in their stance. And the problem is, it actually stops them moving correctly, and they end up actually sitting on that back foot, almost trying to help the ball in the air. So, I'm going to hit one more, and I would say for 7-iron down to your wedges, we're going to have that half that club head inside the left heel, slightly narrower stance, put a nice full swing on it. And again, good strike, nice and consistent, low point 2.4 inches ahead, clubs travelled down 3 degrees, and carry at 162. Now, like I said, for 7-iron down to full shots with wedges, you're going to keep that the same, that narrow stance. Now, I know what you're thinking, what about if I'm playing a pitch shot with a wedge? Well, because it's a smaller swing, obviously we're not going to have as much time to get that weight shifting forward. So all I would do is keep the ball position the same. Again, that narrow stance, maybe even a little narrower, so that gets me a bit more in line with my sternum. And then I would literally just move my weight more onto that left side, get the sternum ahead of the golf ball, and then when I play the pitch shot, just keep my weight on that front foot. And we'll see there, low point 3.8 inches ahead, clubs travel down 5.6 degrees, and there's my little 50 5-yard shot that's carried 54 yards. So it's not really that we need to be trying to hit down more. We're just keeping the ball position fairly much the same with our feet. And then for those shorter shots, we're going to move the sternum ahead, keep it ahead so that we can get that nice delivery, that good strike. And again, we can see 5.2 inches ahead. Club's travelled down 7 degrees, so a little bit more. And again, carried just over 55 yards. Now, let's say, for example, I'm getting into 6, 5, 4 iron, hybrids perhaps. I would still have the ball position the same, but instead of being just narrower at my shoulders, I'd just get that stance a little bit wider. And then we can see, in theory, the ball position a little bit further forward relative to my body. I'm still going to move like I did with the 7 iron, and that would just get the low point still ahead of the ball, but not as exaggerated. But the club that every golfer is obsessed with, driver. So if we said now, we're going to pop the ball up on the tee, if I can get it to stay on my mat, I'm going to leave that on there. Again, we can see the ball in line with the alignment stick. So all we're going to do from here, we've got that maybe inch inside the lead heel. We're going to go much wider with the stance now, maybe even just have a little bit of a tilt away. So we can see that ball position now is more opposite that lead armpit. And then all we're looking to do in the swing is not move that sternum ahead of the golf ball. We're just going to keep the sternum behind. The low point will now be behind the golf ball. And if I can put a swing on it from there, the low point now 3.1 inches behind the ball. The club's travelled up 1.6 degrees and the carry at nearly 240 yards. But ball position is really, really important because it's whereabouts you're making contact with the ball in the golf swing. And even though by setting up with the ball in the same place, changing the width of stance and then just changing the body shape slightly with driver, I agree is putting the ball slightly in different places of the swing, but it's helping you be much more consistent in how you set up. And for some of you out there, you might find that you're just better with a narrower stance. Some of you might find you're a little bit better with a slightly wider stance, but keep that ball position very consistent just inside that left heel and allow the setup change to deliver the club differently. And it'll definitely give you less things to think about at address, hopefully get everything flowing more, and ultimately get you playing the best golf you've ever played.